Welcome to Kessie, the show that celebrates the men and women who are making coastal Mississippi such a great place to live, work, and play. Hey, listen, you may have noticed yesterday I ended the show slightly different, and I think I may do that on a more regular basis, but essentially saying that, I hope you go out and take a minute to enjoy the coast view. And while you're in that moment, find a place in your heart and soul to dream bigger, because this show's really about dreaming bigger, about sharing success stories that you can use in your personal life, but also showing us how when we dream bigger for coastal Mississippi, how important that is. And the more leaders we engage around that, I think the better off we're going to be in the long run. But at the core of Coast View is having conversations with those people who've really dedicated their lives to helping this be a better place to live, work, and play. Our guest here in just a second is one of those people, and we'll come to that in a second. But it's been a hell of a journey over the last couple of years. I want to share a quote from Sidney Poitier. He said this: "I always wanted to be someone better the next day than I was the day before." I think, I think that's a good one for us all to sort of aspire to in our own lives. And certainly for those of us who hope the best for coastal Mississippi, it applies there as well. And here's one that my guests will really relate to, because I do as a news guy. Susan Myers-Griggs, we used to work together at the Sun Herald. She's just a good person. And she posted this: "I can't tell you how many words I've swallowed in the name of keeping the peace. I've got a whole damn library inside my stomach." I just thought that was perfect. I want to welcome my friend Brad Kessie, who is the news director at WLOX, and they're fresh off of, I might say, too, Mississippi Association of Broadcasters. They swept they're obviously Station of the Year and lots of other categories. They're about to celebrate their 60th anniversary coming up in this fall. So I'm really looking forward to chatting with Brad. But Brad, how are you doing, my friend?
Ricky, I am really well, and I'm thinking about dreaming big right now, and I immediately think back to 1992 when South Mississippi was struggling. I didn't know where we were going to go, and honestly, as a guy who's from Chicago, should only be here about 3-4 years, but dreaming big in 92, and look where we are 30 years later.
It's incredible. It's incredible how much transformation there's been in that period of time. So many challenges along the way. Absolutely. We'll certainly talk about that. I saw you sort of chuckle a little bit when I read that about I've got a whole damn library inside my stomach. But you know what it's like to have to swallow some words, don't you?
Yeah. Unfortunately, in the world that I'm in now of management, you got to swallow a lot more words than you did as a reporter. It's. Keeping the peace is such an important variable. I think we are a better community because there are people who want peace, want us to be better. I think back to right before COVID, when there were all the protests around the country, and here in South Mississippi, what did we have? We had rallies that brought people together and celebrated unity. You didn't see that in other parts of the country, but you saw that here, and that is just a microcosm of what South Mississippi is.
It is, and you look as a longtime reporter, people know you well, and then as a news director, you get a different view on this, but it really comes down to the same thing, and I talk about it here on the show all the time. When you think about this notion of resiliency, it's about what is in someone's heart and soul, and it's this ability, no matter how difficult things get, to bounce back. And we're a resilient community. We've been tested over and over again. It's not just hurricanes, but oil spills and algae blooms and the pandemic. In some ways, we sort of have a leg up on some other communities because, I wouldn't wish what we have been through on anyone, but the fact that we've been there and we know what it's like to sort of, when the going gets tough, the tough get going, to reach out to our neighbors and care about them, to not worry about politics in those moments, to come together. We're in a special place when it comes to the people here, aren't we, Brad? Yeah,
when you're in the midst of it, you're obviously thinking, when is this going to end? But when you take that moment to look back at what you accomplished, there's such a great sense of pride, not just for the media, but the entire community. I mean, what we have been through, 60 years, if you want to go back to the beginning of LOX, 30 years, if you want to go back to the start of the casino industry, if you want to go back to Camille in '69 or Katrina in '05, I never thought I would say I was so glad to go through Katrina, but I am, because it changed me as a person, it changed me as a reporter, and it set me on the path that I'm following today, both on a professional level and a personal level in some of the organizations that I'm working with today. And that sense of pride I see every day, whether I'm in the grocery store, getting gas, or just walking through the communities that I walk through to get a little exercise in.
Yeah. Well, in my conversation with Haley Barber, he said that, God chose us, and with Katrina. I mean, the fact that we can't, it is what it is. It hit us. Yep. And so in the aftermath of that, what did we do to grow? What did we do to learn from it and contribute back? And, I'm amazed. There were some people that you would have expected to step up who didn't. They were overwhelmed by the moment. And others that you would have never expected to step up, they did in extraordinary ways. And what I learned about that is that we go through our lives too fast, Brad, and we underestimate some and we overestimate others, and we don't spend enough time to understand the essence of who people really are. That's one of the biggest things I got out of the storm, not the least of which is the importance of leadership and rebuilding and all of that. But what we saw in each other and how we moved too fast before the storm, and how we better take our time to get to know each other a little bit better after the storm. Did you have the same revelation?
I did, but then there was the spin to it, and I'll mention that in a second. But when the fences were down, and neighbors had to be neighbors, and you were having coffee with somebody who lived right across from you who you didn't know before because you didn't have power, and everybody was sitting outside, that camaraderie just helped encapsulate what we were going through. The sad part is, and this is what I mentioned a second ago, is eventually the fences went back up. And occasionally those neighbors who you got to know on a personal level for 3 or 4 or 5 weeks suddenly became, they're just neighbors again. And those relationships disappeared a little bit. I kind of wish the fences were down again. That's part of the condition of America, where we're working hard, man. We leave in the morning, we go do our thing, we come back at the end of the day, we got a family to take care of, we got all these things that we want our quiet time. Someone said to me at the beginning of the pandemic that was sort of the kind of impact the pandemic had, that people felt a little bit safer outside. People were out working in their yards a little bit more because they were stuck at home. And they also had this relationship with their neighbors they didn't have before. People were kind of looking after each other. But there is something, I had an opportunity, this guy named Robert J. Danzig, who was the chairman of the board for Hearst Corporation, spoke at a program I went to at Northwestern University. And he said that there's a powerful lubrication to change that comes from pain, that when you feel pain, that it real push you hard to change. So any division there might have been by, before Katrina, essentially was obliterated. And now with the pain that we all felt, we were all focused on one thing: how do we get back again? And you can relate to that, can't you? Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And look at how far we've come and how we have gotten back. And you just drive to different pockets. And in the last 2 years, especially, as you see home construction along Highway 90 just exploding, trying to bring back that last piece that got obliterated back in '05. Some of the houses, I'm not sure, they're a little too high. They're a little too much on stilts. There are a couple homes right now that I'm wondering if they're going to survive. But it's just so nice to see that people are investing in our community again on all walks of life. And I'm excited about the future of this area. Yeah, I am too, man. When I talk to mayors all up and down the coast, and I often say on my show that we're in a lucky place now, that we have a string of mayors who have gone on to do things in their lives and their careers, and now as mayors they're giving back. It's sort of like I think about George Slogan and what he did, yep. And even Billy Hughes, for the extent that he was in politics for so long, he's got successful businesses that he's involved in,
And, a lot of these guys don't have to be mayor. That's just the reality of it. And they chose to be mayor. And it makes it, you don't take yourself so seriously when you're in a situation like this. And then in the midst of the pandemic, we've seen in some cases a recalibration of capital expenditures by companies. And now you're starting to see more money coming into coastal Mississippi. I mean, downtown Pascagoula is on fire. Ocean Springs is doing amazingly well. Bay St. Louis is on fire. Look what's happening in Gulfport. Biloxi, I don't even think there's any available land in Biloxi downtown now. So it's truly amazing. Hey, listen, we're coming to the end of this segment. When we come back, I want to sort of talk about the changing chapters of WLOX. These days, if you go to the station, a lot of young reporters, they're doing a good job, as was represented recently by all the awards that they were able to get. It takes a lot of hard work to get to that level of excellence. We'll talk a little bit more about that with Brad Kessie when we come back. Welcome back to Coast View. I have Brad Kessie, who's the news director at WLOX, and someone I've known for an awful long time. It's interesting. When I think about my relationship with WLOX, it was one where there was always very significant competition between our two newsrooms. I mean, it was, and then of course on the advertising side, we were working hard to steal share from one another. But it was interesting. We always had this emergency publication agreement that we would help each other out when difficult times happened, and we did other partnering along the way. So it's interesting. It was like this. It was dichotomy. On one side, we competed dramatically. And on the other, which made us both better, incidentally. And on the other side, we helped each other. I remember going over after Hurricane Katrina, and your roof had damage, and you really needed to get it patched. And I started making phone calls to Roy Anderson and others to try to figure out how we could help you guys get back up. When on elections, on just storm coverage in general, we just worked together. But I always had infinite respect for WLOX and the role that they played in the community. Times have changed. Sun Herald is just fortunately a skeleton of itself because of the digital tsunami that has overcome most news organizations around the country. But local news organizations have been able to mostly hold their own. But to say that there's been no changes is wrong, because the relationship that you guys have with the networks are different, and there's just been a lot of change, hasn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. And let's start with the friendship, if you will, between LOX and the Sun Herald. I have said since the day I got here, the competition was great. It made me a better reporter. The Louise Taylors of the world that you had forced me to dig deeper. But I always thought that we should be partners in that television, in essence, unless we're doing something that's really investigative, gives you the headlines. That's all we have time for, and put quotes around time. If you want to know the full story, we give you the headlines. Then you can go pick up the newspaper, read the story 2, 3, 4 times to be able to digest what that particular topic is that day. I think we forgot that along the way because of the competition. But you're right. I think back 2005, you helped us make phone calls about the roof. We had portalets. And you guys were coming over because we had portalets that you could use for the first couple of days. So, yeah, I mean, we may be in Biloxi and the Sun Herald was in Gulfport, but DeBees Road was the divider. It was a fun competition, especially for me, because I was hungry. I wanted to be the lead story every day, and I wanted to beat Patrick Peterson, and I wanted to beat I just wanted to beat them all, and times they beat me. The business has changed from where it was to where we are today. I worry a little bit because the network slant impacts how people perceive us, and they shouldn't. We are your voice. We're here to protect and to cover news that relates to you, the local viewer. We don't slant as much as people like to think we do slant. And that's hard. That phrase fake news has hurt some of the people who work here because it gets thrown at them, and it's not fair and it's not true. Yeah,
I think, Brad, what's happened is you and I have seen this happen for a long time. I think more people are aware of it today because it's become sort of the topic of the moment. But the moment that cable news became a 24-hour cycle, then what we saw was that cable news needed to fill that time. So they didn't do it always with news. CNN made a dramatic change from being sort of this 24-hour news operation to being just filled with lots of opinion that tended to be left-leaning. And then you had Fox emerge and the same kind of thing that was happening there, but more right-leaning. And then more cable news operations came around, and so that's been building for quite a long time. But then I think the situation as it relates to social media, and I think it's a real problem actually that they've got Section 230 protection, which means the content that they present to us, they don't have to own it. And look, I had to own every newspaper I was ever responsible for, and internet site I was responsible for. I had to own it legally, and you had to own it legally. Yep. It's not only an unfair advantage, but it enables incredible misinformation to get shared, and that I think has taken the cable news situation and exacerbated it to a level that we never in our wildest imagination could have thought we would be at this moment.
No, you're right. And the hardest part is that local media has to be part of that social structure, because if you're not reaching a particular audience. And so the messaging, while we do a very good job, Sun Herald does a really good job of getting the right message out there, it gets lost in the mix in those social channels, and before you know it, doesn't matter what we put out there. You'll be accused of race baiting, you'll be accused of things that have nothing to do with what you're trying to communicate to the viewer, and it makes our business that much more difficult. And it's probably why you see such young faces, at least at WLOX, because the older generation don't want to be part of it anymore.
Yeah, my friend Alberto Ibargüen, who's the president and CEO of the Knight Foundation, the former publisher of the El Nuevo Herald and the Miami Herald, we're good friends. He's been on the show a couple of times. We talk regularly. But, one of the things he said, and I think he's right about this, that there's so much noise on the national level, it's almost impossible to cut through it. The Knight Foundation is not trying to compete with that. Where their focus has been local. How do we make sure, because certainly democracy happens on the national level, but significant democracy happens on the local level. And he's always believed that an accurately and reliably informed citizenry is literally critical to democracy, particularly on a local level. He thinks that their investments, their hundreds of millions of dollars of investments in local journalism can make a difference and will help us sort of eventually overcome this. But it's hard. I mean, because what happens is, as you pointed out, the national noise around misinformation and fake news and all these things that are sort of common knowledge to most people today, it gets projected locally. And sometimes it's almost impossible to cut through that, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So the investment that Gray Media has made in now 113 stations, we're the second largest broadcast media company in the country. Right as the pandemic started, they sent out, at that time we were 90 stations. We hadn't bought Meredith yet. They sent out equipment for digital desks to all 90 television stations. So there was nobody here, but we were setting up these digital desks, and they created, in essence, a 24/7 digital empire that's based out of Omaha, Nebraska. And they're doing news 24 hours a day. It's on our website. We take over when we have live newscasts. If we have a news conference we're going to cover, we do that. It's their version of headline news, if you will. Yeah. But it gives you real news from real reporters. It happens to be from around the country, but it's local. It's concentrated not just on local here, but local around the country. And I think it's news that you can trust, because it's coming from journalists who are working in every market in our country. It's where our business is going.
Yeah.
You know this. They said by now, which is actually about 5 years ago, that 50% of the revenue would come from digital. They still haven't hit that number.
Yeah.
We're inching that way, but for us, television is still king. I don't know how much longer it's going to be that way, though, Ricky. And that's as an old school television guy, that's what worries me a little bit.
Well, look, I've watched the evolution. I've watched the change in ownership at WLOX. And, I had, when I was in Alabama, president of the Alabama Media Group, I got to know the retirement system of Alabama really well, and the leader there, very visionary man. But I think the gray media transition is a good one, and I've watched it closely. They've done a lot of what we were doing in my previous companies, where if for example, the Washington Bureau, for example, and having that be fully functioning and sharing with all the other TV stations across the country. I like the tone of the culture they're creating. It's hard to scale, man. The point I'm making here is that it's hard to bring these disparate communities together into sort of one big umbrella, which Gray Media is doing fairly effectively by not robbing sort of the local voice in the process. I do think the focus on digital is incredibly important. I spent the last part of my career in that area. And but you still got a situation where people are still watching local TV. They really are. And while the numbers may not be what they used to be, they're still very strong and still valuable for advertisers. And at the end of the day, Brad, advertisers are the ones who are determining whether you're going to be successful or not. Hey, we'll talk a little bit more about that. I don't want to rob you from an opportunity to respond to that. When we come back on the other side, we'll continue our conversation with Brad Kessie from WLOX. Welcome back to Coast View. I'm having a terrific conversation with my old friend Brad Kessie from WLOX. And when we went to break, we were just talking about how this Gray corporation that they're part of today, Gray Media, is I think it's a move in the right direction. And I don't want to. I've made some other comments, Brad. I didn't want to move to the next subject without giving you an opportunity to respond to that.
But the biggest thing for me and for South Mississippi is that Gray has such a strong presence across the region, especially in those months between June and November when hurricane season is here. We've got stations in Lake Charles, in Baton Rouge, in New Orleans, in Hattiesburg, in Mobile now, Savannah, Georgia, up the East Coast. And we all can share content. We can all share information. So as storms are approaching, we have the ability to tap into so many other resources, and we had that with Raycom. We just expanded when we became Gray, and it's so valuable for us, and that means it's so valuable for the people who watch us because they're getting that pertinent information. They're getting it from the people that they can trust, and that's what matters the most.
The other thing that's important about that, as I worked in a corporate role the latter part of my career, the opportunity to be part of a company like that has locations all over the United States, the opportunity to learn from them.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, the best practices that emanate from that, there's a bit of competition inside the company too. You want to be the best you can be. You want to be the best in the company. And, maybe this is a good transition. I mean, to get Station of the Year by the Mississippi Association of Broadcasters, and I should point out, best newscast, best breaking weather coverage, best continuing coverage, best investigative reporting, best news anchor, best news reporter, best multimedia, best general news, best high school football program, to do sort of a clean sweep, so to speak. I mean, I've luckily been part of organizations that have done well in similar scenarios like this. You got to be focused on excellence. And what's cool about what you've been able to do in such a short period of time, you've had this massive turnover of people. Retirements, mostly retirements. And these young people coming in and them sort of buying into the concept, buying into the vision of what you want WLOX to be relative to this community. It's got to be gratifying to see that transition pay off.
The best part is, and I was telling this to somebody yesterday, that WLOX is a brand. It's a trusted brand. It's a brand that we've had for 60 years. Dave Vincent. He was my boss. He was news director for 28 years before I took over. I was always worried that the house of cards would come toppling down once I took over because of those retirements. And, because the infrastructure was in place, and we've made a couple of pretty good hires along the way, and the people who we brought in bought into the idea that WLOX matters and we can help them become better. We've been able to carry on what I call the tradition of excellence. And I am gratified. I mean, you know me, I'm a perfectionist. I hate every time we make a single mistake. I tell everybody here, there's 50 people who work in the newsroom, and if we all make one mistake, we're all working, we all make one mistake a day, that's 50 mistakes, and you can't have 50 mistakes on a newscast. And so we've got to strive for perfection, and we come close. And I'm really proud of that. And, a couple of weeks ago when we got those awards that you mentioned, it was extremely gratifying. It was the first time in a couple of years I didn't know what we had won going in, because I had served on the board, so I had to sneak peek in previous years. This year, they didn't want me to get a sneak peek, so I was as surprised as everybody else. And to see the people who won swell up with pride that night in front of their peers in Jackson made it so rewarding for me, and I know for them as well.
So what's the secret? When you're for so many years, you guys were loaded with long-term journalists who almost were in like auto mode. I mean, they were so good at what they did, and they just did what they did, and you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
And so a string of them retire.
Yep.
And you have these young people who come along. How different is it today to have to motivate and inspire young journalists in this world that we're in today? How different is it?
It's night and day. It is so much harder today because, and I think you can appreciate this, the journalists today may not be as invested, the young ones, as we were. We lived and breathed it. So if we worked 8 or 9 hours during the day, we went home and continued to work even though we weren't working, and we watched other work, and we read, and we were well versed coming into the office the next day and the day after. And I don't think today's journalists are, and it's not just here, it's universally, are as connected to beyond that 8 hours that they're supposed to work. So that's hard. But while they're here, if you're in their ear, and for us, we're presenting an environment where we want them to succeed and not fail. And I remind them all that they and their families matter more than the job that they're doing, and I'm going to have their backs. I get more from them because of that, and I think that's critically important. And so we're able to make it work. We still have a couple of seasoned people. The Bill Snyders of the world are still here, and that's huge, because I know I can rely on him as we're bringing this new breed in.
Yeah, it is. I agree with you. It's not specific to there. It is. I had multiple young people in my prior world, and it's a generational thing. I mean, they're teaching their seminars today on this, that they're wanting more instant gratification. They want to have more balance between work and whatever they do when they're not at work. It's just a reality of sort of the situation. But what I found is, and what most of the research bears out, is that as they mature and they begin to really settle in and understand what role they can play in making the news better or making the community better, that some of them emerge, leaders emerge among them. And that's exciting to be able to see that, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And so for us, we went through a brain drain, so to speak, back in the fall. I lost a reporter who went to Birmingham, a reporter who went to Cincinnati, a reporter who went to Louisville, a reporter who went to New Orleans. These are jumps that once upon a time reporters didn't make. There was an interim stop before they went to a Cincinnati. And so these are people who had been with us a couple of years, took a little time to get their feet entrenched in what they wanted to do. And then they took full advantage of the opportunities they had. I'm so proud. I didn't want to lose them. It's been a pain in the trying to fill their positions because nobody's applying right now. But I am so thrilled that they are succeeding at the level they are, and I use that as my selling pitch to people. I can get you wherever you want to go. You just need to trust and invest in us.
So, I always felt, Zig Ziglar once said, if you help people get what they want in life, you'll get what you want in life. And I think focusing on giving people the developmental opportunities and understanding what their goals are. And in some cases, their goal is not to stay. That's fine. You can get 2 or 3 or 4 good years out of them as they develop, and they'll never forget the role that you played in helping them get to wherever they end up in their lives. They will not forget that. Hey, Brad, one of the things that I really want to compliment you on, I've fished offshore my whole life. I'm kind of an amateur meteorologist. I spend a lot of time focusing on that. I think a lot of people are, particularly tropical. Excuse me?
I've seen your Facebook posts.
Yeah. So, but but I think that the team you've assembled on the weather side is particularly good now. Yeah. I'm not saying that it wasn't good before, but you've just got the cadre of group of weather people you've gotten together today. They're articulate. They do really well in tough scenarios where a tornado may be on the ground at this moment, or maybe imminent threat from a hurricane is going to happen. There's a fine line between not exacerbating the emergency response that people might make and making sure that they play it safe. There's a fine line there, and you guys have done a really good job with that.
And they could have left, and they decided not to leave, which says something about them as people who are committed to South Mississippi, and it says something to their commitment to WLOX. I think, and I tell this to all my colleagues in Gray, I've got the best collection of Mets probably in the company. And I say that braggadocious because that's what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to be a cheerleader. And I appreciate you complimenting them because between Carrie and Wesley and Eric and Taylor, they've got my back and they've got your back.
Well, they need to have our back, and we're comparing them to, as you pointed out, there are a lot of gray stations that are in imminent threats at times from hurricanes. So these guys, they're stacking up against some really good stations, and it's very impressive. Hey, listen, when we come back, we're going to continue the conversation with Brad Kessie from WLOX. See you after this break. Welcome back to the final segment of Coast View. I have Brad Kessie, who is the news director for WLOX and an old friend. And, it's one of the reasons I enjoy doing this show, Brad, is that we have this opportunity to kind of visit. We get a chance to look back. We get a chance to talk about the current situation. And we also get a chance to think about the future. And, when I think about coastal Mississippi, as we've already discussed, the opportunities for us are incredible. But the role that journalism is going to play in that is really important. I mean, we have to hold people accountable because, as I said to you off the air, and I'll make part of a opening speech I have to do at the One Coast Awards, that there is a powerful a powerful gravity toward mediocrity. In other words, this notion of protecting the status quo, when we're all trying to raise the bar. Journalism and the work that we do here on Coast View, the work that you do at WLOX, it's an important component to dreaming bigger, isn't it?
It is. Our responsibility is to ask the questions and demand the answers. And these aren't just any questions. They're questions that impact the fabric of how we're going to live. We are the eyes and the ears of the public. And I take that responsibility very seriously, and that's one of the things that we strive to push and present to our staff every day. Go out there and be a representative of the coast. Can we be a cheerleader? Yeah, we're going to be cheerleaders at times. It's not our job. We're going to ask tough questions sometimes and not be aligned with, a Billy Hughes, for instance, has admonished me on more than one occasion because we are asking questions that may hurt economic development. But that's our job, and he understands that.
I get it. I get it complete. Well, you've got WSXV has developed their news operation. Mm-hmm. How do you view the notion of local TV news competition?
I want them to be as successful as they can be. I want them to hit a home run every day. And I want that because it forces my people to be better. And from the day XXV came on the air with the second wave of journalists and newscasts, I wanted them to be great. I'm comfortable that the WLOX is going to win the day because of who we are and because of the quality that we put on the air. But at the same time, just like the competition that I had across the street with the Sun Herald, you can only get better if somebody is pushing you, and the push has to come from our competition.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. And I would only add this, that when you look at the total number of journalists that are in coastal Mississippi compared to where it might have been 10 or 15 years ago, there's not enough resources to go around. So the more journalists we have out there doing the work, the better off we are. And even though it is competitive, at the end of the day, we have a better community because there's more coverage of the important issues, and that's really important. How did you view Megan Gray's exodus?
How did I view it? One of my closest friends from years gone by, she made a decision once the company made its decision, and I respected the decision that she had to make. It was not an easy decision, I will tell you, and I'm sure if you've talked with her, she's told you it took her until the 11th hour to finally make the determination that she was going to leave, and that's why she didn't have a chance to really say goodbye to her WLOX viewers other than hinting. It devastated me on a very personal level because of my respect for her. I'm pleased that she had a contract that had a non-compete in it for 12 months, and I'm pleased that we said that if XXV gave her the opportunity that she could go over there. And I'm glad that she's landed on her feet. Listen, the best newscast that we submitted for entry this year was the newscast that she anchored. I was not afraid to submit that, and it won. And, that's because she's a quality individual and she's a wonderful talent. And we all miss her. We're glad she's succeeding. But, we're also happy with what we have here.
That's a great answer. That's a great answer. I love this whole notion of the non-compete. And most companies I was involved in, there was a non-compete in place, and that's not a small decision to make because it could be precedent setting. It's important. It's an important decision. The fact that you guys care for her personally is important. But hey, okay, so it happened. She moves on. She's landed well, and life goes on. What that does, just like the other reporters that you were talking about, it creates opportunities for new people to emerge. And you filled the seed, and you're moving forward, right?
We're moving forward, and we're moving forward in a way that has given us an opportunity to make some changes that we wanted to make, loosen the newscast up just a little bit, give us a little more time for personality to appear in the morning. I thought we were a little stale for a long time, and we just never figured out how to get the anchors a little more engaged. And this opportunity came up, and we took advantage of it. And I think Chet and Jamie are really starting to come together in a way that I had envisioned, and I'm excited about what the future brings for them. The viewers have not gone away from us. I'm happy to say, as I look at the numbers, and if anything, we've ticked up just a little bit. Change is good at the end of the day. Yeah.
Hey, listen, we're out of time, but Brad, has been a great opportunity for me to catch up with you. Congratulations on all your success, and look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you, Ricky. I appreciate it.
As I always end the show, have a great day, enjoy the view, and work hard to think bigger, dream bigger for yourself and for coastal Mississippi. That's what this show is all about. We'll see you tomorrow.